Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
The Revenue Commissioner outlines the governor's tax proposal, and troubled parents and a lawmaker express concerns over the youth sports mask mandate. Plus, the Senate DFL lay out their priorities for the legislative session. Stay tuned for this and more on this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. Heated debate occurred on the Senate floor over a bill that would allow local government aid to be used to reimburse cities and counties for unpaid mutual aid agreements.
Communities were reluctant to re-enter into their mutual aid agreements with the city of Minneapolis with over concerns about being paid. And as a result of that, we then have taken the liberty of putting together this bill that very simply takes money that a community who receives local government aid, if they do not pay the money that is owed to those communities that have provided mutual aid, upon proper certification by the communities to whom the money is owed, the state then can withhold money from the local government aid and compensate those communities.
My city is the economic engine of this state. It just so happened that I have a growing population in my district. People want to come and live in Minneapolis. We have a tax base that supports rural Minnesota because your communities are declining.
This is setting a precedent for events yet to come, for cities that have not yet experienced disasters.
The pretense of this legislation is that Minneapolis is irresponsibly diverting funds from its police department. The force is short-staffed, and we need to force Minneapolis to take its obligations towards public safety more serious.
It's not a proper step to defund your police, get rid of your law enforcement or minimize it, and then expect the state to continue bailing you out.
Sometimes communities do things because they are in some ways closer to the public than we are, and they are dealing with a lot of day-to-day issues, and so they make decisions based on what they are hearing from their communities.
This is not a bill to punish Minneapolis. Nowhere in this bill does it mention Minneapolis. This is a bill that gives local governments the ability to collect from another local government.
This is a pay your bills bill. That's all it is. It's not specific to Minneapolis. It's pay your bills bill.
What I hear from people is not so much about bailing out Minneapolis, but not bailing out the city leadership of Minneapolis.
There being 35 ayes and 32 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.
And a measure to trim state agency budgets came before the Finance Committee.
Senate File 3 is basically the conversation, and it is asking our agencies, our commissions, all of the above that receive state funding to look at their expenses.
This bill fails to constructively address the unprecedented challenges we have today and sets up a budget forecast that's not really rooted in reality.
This bill takes that current growth and digs deeper into it by 5%, making it even more unstable, more uncertain.
We've got constituents out there on Main Street who are wondering what's going on with our state government right now and why they are bearing the burden of $1.6 billion governor proposal for increased taxes.
We are the taxpayers, and the taxpayers out there are hurting already. So I think there's a real disconnect between where the large majority of Minnesotans live and what it is like for them and what they see in government.
Instead of having administration come in with artificial numbers, you should want the best accurate numbers that include inflation, that include the reality of what the spending is.
During the budget process, we're given a forecast. You're expected to cut your expenses, your administrative expenses by X amount. And that becomes the starting point. It's not an unrealistic number.
Governor Walz's budget plan for the coming biennium includes some significant tax changes. I spoke with Commissioner of Revenue Robert Doty about the proposal. Last month, a report revealed that revenue collections in January were 14% higher than forecast. And the most crucial report, the February budget and economic forecast, is just around the corner. Generally speaking, to what degree might these new figures impact the governor's tax proposal?
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. So let me, in my response to that, quite frankly, is that, it is great and very positive that tax collections are better than forecast. And but I think that the governor's attention right now is still on those families and those individuals that are still hurting right now from COVID-19 and the impacts of the pandemic. There are families right now that are truly struggling. So right now, I can't answer how that will impact what changes to the proposals there will be in the future here. We'll have to see what the forecast says, but I will tell you that the governor's focus is definitely still on those families that are truly hurting.
Well, and so let's get into the details here, because the governor's budget proposal is $52 billion two-year budget. He's called it the COVID-19 recovery budget, and it has some significant tax implications, especially to help those people most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So can you walk us through the tax changes that would benefit those people the most?
Sure. So the first one that I'll walk through is the expansion of the first tier income tax bracket. And basically this is an expansion of the first tier of the income threshold that will become part of the first tier. So really what this does is that those taxpayers who have their last dollar of income in the second tier will actually see a reduction in their taxes, as more of their income is then taxed at the lower tax rate of 5.3% rather than the 6.8%. This proposal will affect more than 1 million taxpayers, and that decrease in tax will on average be about $36 per return. Now, I know for some people I've heard say, well, $36 isn't really that much. Well, again, my response continues to be to that two things. One is that for a lot of people right now, again, who are really hurting and struggling, $36 is meaningful. And I don't want to ever minimize that. And so that's really important. The second thing that's important with this is the fact that this proposal is part of an overall package of investments that truly will help those who, again, have been most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this is just part of a bigger package.
Well, and another element of that then is the family tax credit for I think I said that right. The working family credit for lower income households, they would see a one-time payment. And also the angel tax credit is something that the governor is proposing. Who does that help?
So again, the working family credit will help lower and moderate income Minnesotans, and that is that proposal increases both the credit percentage as well as the phase-out percentage for the working family credit by about 18%. And so Minnesotans will see an increase in that credit of about $160 starting in tax year 2021. So that's again, I have to say that's part of the overall package again. And then the angel tax credit, the governor's proposal puts about $7 million into that credit starting in tax year 2022. The angel tax credit is a refundable credit that provides incentives, if you will, for individual investors as well as investment funds to provide equity investments to startup businesses that are focused more on technology. And so currently the tax credit was kind of set to sunset at the end of 2021. So the governor's proposal extends that into 2022.
And so in order to pay for this, the governor has said that he's asking those who can to pay their fair share. That 0.7% of the highest income earners in Minnesota would see their taxes go up through the creation of a fifth tier. Now, currently the top tax bracket pays 10%. What would be the new percentage if this new tax tier is created, and about how many Minnesotans fall into this category?
Sure. So just to give you just a step back half a second, give you a little bit of background. So we currently have our highest tax bracket right now is around 4%. Excuse me. Our highest tax bracket right now is our fourth tier, which is at 9.85%.
Okay, I think I meant almost 10.
Right, okay. And that impacts if you're married filing joint and your income is above 276,000, if you are head of household, it's 220,000, and if you are single, it's 166,000. The governor's proposal increases the fourth tier rate to 10.85% to create this new fifth tier. Okay, and so that would be for individuals making married filing jointly. Their income would be $1 million or greater, and if you're head of household, $750,000 or greater, or if you're single, $500,000 or greater. And I think so. To answer your question about the impact, so currently there's about 80,000 tax households that fall into our current fourth tier. Now remember the difference in those thresholds. So there's about 80,000 that fall into that fourth tier. When you add this fifth tier, and again, now you're looking at, like you said, the top 0.7% of Minnesotans, and that's about 21,000 tax returns that would be paying this higher rate. And those taxpayers would see an increase of a little over $8,000 per return. I think the other thing that's really important to always kind of come back to is that 99.3% of Minnesotans would see no increase in their tax at all.
There's one more thing that I really want to get to before we run out of time, and that is the increase in taxes on the corporate franchise taxes, which would go from 9.8 to 11.25%. Who are these businesses? Because critics say that they're going to leave the state or they're going to pass those costs on to their consumers. How do you defend that?
So, Shannon, obviously that's the discussion that's going on right now, right? And so a couple things. So first of all, it's important to note that this is for profitable C corporations. That's the first thing. And so that's really important. So, and again, it is to acknowledge that C corporations come in large and small sizes. So I think that's important to note. Now, in terms of this whole notion of businesses leaving the state, I think the jury's really out on that. I mean, there's a lot of conflicting studies and information out there that says that some say a higher tax rate could potentially force businesses out of the state, and there's others that say it doesn't. I think a couple things that I would kind of fall back on. One is that in 2017, when the tax rate was increased, to 9.8%, we haven't really seen a migration that resulted from that. So I think that's also really important. The other thing that's also important to note is that businesses or corporations will leave a state potentially for a lot of reasons, right? And the tax rate may just be one of those. Some of those may be other things related to the business climate, maybe the infrastructure issues. It may be issues with regard to finding eligible workers. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why a business could leave. And I think the other thing that I've also heard people talk about is the fact that that if you raise the corporate franchise rate, that corporations will simply just pass that right along to consumers. And I think that the other thing that you remember with that is that that any kind of increase in the corporate franchise rate potentially is passed on to both consumers, workers, as well as shareholders. And then depending on the level of activity that a business has within Minnesota, also some of that is exported outstate. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. And again,
I'm sorry, we are running out of time, and so I'm going to have to stop you there. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time, and we can go into this more another time.
All right, thank you.
Leaders of the Senate DFL caucus called a virtual press conference to outline their priorities for the 2021 legislative session.
The Senate DFL is committed to working together to build the state all Minnesotans deserve, including opportunities and protections for all, at home, at work, at school, in their environment, and at the ballot box.
Paid family medical leave provides Minnesota workers with up to 12 weeks of paid leave so that they can care for a family member with a serious health condition or bond with a newborn child. My family, like many others across Minnesota, owns a small business, and we can't afford to offer this kind of benefit to our employees on our own.
Each child, regardless of race, zip code, or economic status, is deserving of an opportunity in early education opportunities through post-secondary opportunities.
We know we need to take bold action together to create a clean energy future with healthy communities, a healthy climate, and meaningful and dignified work for working Minnesotans.
Protecting our democracy is one of the most important jobs before us. The Senate DFL is committed to expanding citizen access to voting, advocating for policies, and empowering citizens to participate in the political process.
And what I'm especially proud of is that the Senate DFL is for working families, for working men and women, for jobs, and for equality, racial equality, gender equality, and mostly equality of opportunity.
During a recent committee hearing, parents of kids in youth sports told their stories.
As a result of this mask mandate, my son suffered a concussion.
My daughter turned with the player and was running towards her teammate on the floor. She collided into them. And I asked her, "Why did you run into your teammates?" She said, "I didn't see them." I replied, "How could you have not seen them?" She said, "I saw nothing in the corner of my eye. And when I hit them, I didn't even know what happened."
My son on Friday night passed out during his game because he was wearing a mask while playing basketball, and the ball was in his possession again. He lost it. Another player went up for a basket. He went up for a rebound and ended up right about when he landed, just losing consciousness.
My daughter was participating at a hockey practice wearing a face mask when she suddenly collapsed and fell to the ice. After collapsing, she remained on the ice, face down for 20 seconds until she was attended to by her coaches.
Senator Rich Draheim spearheaded the legislative discussion over masking for youth sports, and I spoke with him this week. During the Health and Human Services discussion on youth sports and masking, you mentioned that you've seen firsthand the effect that masking is having on our kids who play youth sports. What have you seen?
Thanks for having me. And what I have seen, I have two children. They both play basketball, and then my youngest, who's 12, he also plays hockey. And I have seen a basketball player at the free throw line go to her knees. First, she put her head between her knees, and then she actually sat down, was unresponsive. Obviously short of breath. I've had an own family member faint during practice. A coach called the parent, and said that your child fainted. In the last hour, I got a text message from one of the parents of a kid that's a year older than my son, who he plays goalie, and he had a hard time getting his helmet off and was hyperventilating from wearing a mask, and he's never had a problem. And he's been playing hockey for 10 years. So, every day I hear stories from people in my district and around the state that since I've been vocal about the issue here, we have the safest portion of society. The kids have been the least affected by this awful disease. And, I feel we're doing more harm than good. There are things we should do to try to keep them safe. But I think wearing a mask while they're on the court or on the rink isn't the direction to go.
The Department of Health says that the concern with youth sports, one of the concerns is the asymptomatic spread of the virus that kids can do. So maybe they aren't sick, but they could spread the virus. So with that said, the reason for the hearing was to give a platform to people to express their concerns. And the Department of Health expressed, why they've made the decisions that they've made. Were you satisfied with their presentation?
No, not at all. And, just little things that, this isn't the first conversation I've had with the Minnesota Department of Health in regards to this. And one of the things is their definition of an outbreak. They always say they're using science and using the numbers. So I've had 3 definitions of what an outbreak was from the same person with MDH, Assistant Commissioner Huff. And first it was 5 in a 30-day window, and then it was 3 in a 2-week window, and it turns out it's only 2 people that were at the same event over a 14-day period, or same location, I should say, and that's considered an outbreak. So in their contract tracing questions, they talk about, not only participated in sports, but did you attend a sports event? So it could be players, could be coaches, could be referees or officials, or a spectator. And in my belief and what I've seen, the rates are no different than the general public out in public. So I have a hard time with what they're saying and what they're trying to tell me how I should raise my kid.
And you did say that you feel that you should make the decisions that you think are best for your family and not the Department of Health. But that said, why should parents challenge the decisions of the high school sports league or the Department of Health? Somebody has to make the decision. How do you grapple with that?
Well, I would have agreed with them, or I did agree with them when the outbreak first happened in March. We didn't know enough. Now we know enough. And hospitalization rates are way down. All the stats are way down. I don't need to list them all. But we also found that kids aren't affected, and we've lost 2 kids that, I think one was under 4 and one was 9. In Minnesota in almost a year. Tragic, and I don't know the underlying condition of it, but the kids are safe. And, as a parent, if I had a immune deficiency or I was at a high risk, then maybe I wouldn't want my kids playing. But that should be up to me to decide, and my parents, my kids as grandparents, take precautions, and it's up to them to decide what interaction they want with their grandchildren. And both of them have said they'd rather see our kids playing and having somewhat of a normal upbringing, and be able to see their friends. For us in rural Minnesota, we don't live on a block with, most of us don't, with 50 other kids. The only time they get to see kids is either at school or in an activity. and the activity's been taken away from them. The school up till recently was shut down, and some kids don't have a healthy home, and they don't have a good home experience. So their only chance at normalcy is either at school or in an activity. So I think we need to weigh all that in.
As far as I know, the Department of Health has said that there have only been 3 injuries related to mask wearing, but you think the number might be higher. Why do you think so?
Well, I've witnessed that many myself, and then that Let Them Play group, put out a study that was done January 20th, I think for a week. They had 610 players express dizziness or experience dizziness. I think 40 lost consciousness, 20 had concussions, and 150, I think, had vomited. So they obviously didn't ask, they didn't check. When I asked this question to MDH, where should they report it? And they said the high school league. And I said, well, most of the kids that are playing sports aren't in the high school league. They're in a club league or are under ninth grade and don't play through the high school league, especially with hockey, very, very popular in Minnesota. So where should they do it? And I asked that twice, and it wasn't until the hearing they gave us the contact information. So they wanted you to report it, but they didn't tell you who to report it to. So, another frustration of the parents too. So every day since then, I have gotten emails. Where do I contact to talk about? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just briefly before we have to go. As far as I know, I haven't seen a bill on this. What would you like to see happen?
Well, I think it's up to the governor and his executive orders to probably modify what he's doing. And I think the parents and the coaches should have a seat at the table. There's more than the high school league in Minnesota, and I think every sport is a little different. For basketball, I think having them space out the chairs and wear a mask on the bench, I have no problem with that. I get that. I'm good with that. And for hockey, they're padded from head to toe. They aren't in that close of a contact. It's, the rinks are huge, and they're not together that much. Yes, they fight for the puck, but they're always moving. So I think there's room to modify it.
Senator Rich Draheim, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.